So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their successes, their challenges, and what really drives them forward. And Stan, really delighted to have with us Alex Hunter, who's the commercial director at Spark Market Research. So first, Alex, really thank you for coming on board. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Spark and tell us how you help your clients, that would be wonderful.
So I'm Alex. I work for a wonderful company called Spark. We are part of a wider group called the Audience Collective. How do we help our clients? I think it's really as simple as once upon a time, a man would stand at the front of his shop door and he'd watch his men and women come into the store and walk back out again, and everyone he'd know by name. And he'd wave goodbye to them, and he'd maybe even have their orders ready at the door sometimes. But in the world where store networks are 2,000, 3,000 strong, we provide that glue to people that people missing, and that might be in stores, it might be for brands that are in those stores, it might be for pubs or restaurants or banks or whatever. But the glue that should hold people together, that is an understanding of people in general, is really where market research comes in. Market research gets maligned a little bit as the clipboard wielders. We try to take a slightly different approach, which is really trying to understand what drives behaviour. Why do people do the things that they do? And quite simply, that's what we're all about. We're there to try and understand why people do the things they do.
Makes perfect sense to me. I often, when I work with clients, say, well, what do your customers say? And they can't tell me. And it's like, well, if you don't know what your market is doing and what it wants, then how can you deliver to it? Funny enough, I was lucky enough to speak to a guy called Sir Terry Matthews, who's the first Welsh billionaire. He's around for that. I was lucky enough, he spoke at an event and I had a chat with him afterwards. But during the event, someone asked him, what's your secret to business? It was a very sort of trite question, but what's your secret to business? And he says, look, I know this sounds really simple, but I asked my customers what they wanted and I got it for them. Yeah. And it was as simple as that, but without knowing what they want, I guess it's impossible to get it for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and over the years, as corporations have taken over the world, we have definitely lost touch. And I've certainly worked in some businesses that are pretty big. In fact, I once worked at the world's biggest company, which is which at the time was Walmart. So I worked at Asda, and it's fascinating how far removed some people can get from the behavior. And that's what I said about the behavior at the start. Yes. The behavior that drives their balance sheet. What goes on, what actual human behavior happens that drives your balance sheet. And if you don't understand what it is that's doing that, what that mechanism is, then you may well end up in troubled waters.
And I would imagine, obviously we've had a lot of enforced behavioural change over the last couple of years. So what you do now is going to be absolutely vital, even for companies that perhaps thought they knew what their client base was doing. I would imagine there's lots of behavioural changes you're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, it's oft talked about at the moment, which is, behavior takes a certain amount of time to embed within people. Yes. Now, that's not necessarily true for all behavior. Some behavior it can be changed quite rapidly, and some behavior takes a bit longer. And that tends to be down to whether or not it conforms to our already pre-existing attitudes. Do we already want to do something, or is it quite hard for us to do? So quite naturally, for a load of people who were already working from home a lot, the behavior for them when they started to work from home probably was already quite simple and stuck quite easy. They already had stuff in place. It was quite simple to do. And it probably will be very difficult to shift some of their people out of that. Whereas there are some behaviors, quite famously exercise, people just don't seem to like to exercise that much. And it's things like that gets a lot of noise around it about how long it takes for that kind of behavior to stick. But yeah, there's a lot of behavior that has changed, and it's offered both challenges but also opportunities. Of course, it offers opportunities. People not being in a city centre quite so much and not getting a £3 meal deal offers opportunities for people to cook at home, do things at home, have different ways of eating. And that's presenting some really great opportunities for some brands, as well as the challenges for some people who make sandwiches, for example.
Yeah, brilliant. Must be very fascinating right now. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into business and this particular business.
How did I get into business? I don't know. I guess I kind of fell into it. Like most people, they kind of wake up one day and they realize they're in an office job. I guess my first proper office job, proper office job, was working for a big media company called Publicis Blueprint. It was a publishing company, and they needed someone who was good at spreadsheets, and I just happened to be the kind of tinkerer that was good at spreadsheets. I had a misspent youth with computers, and I guess that's sort of how I ended up in the sort of marketing sphere. And I've not really looked back, and I could have looked back. There could have been a lot of other things I wanted or could have done, but I didn't. I did this, and I spent many years both in agencies and working inside brands. That's allowed me quite a rounded understanding of what we have to do in marketing to move the dial. My interest in people has sort of driven me towards insights and creating. I mean, I sometimes hate the word insights, because it's a rare thing to find a true insight. For me, an insight drives a business forwards. It changes a business. Yeah. And so when we just the word insights with the S on the end seems wrong, because one insight should be enough. It should be enough to make a massive difference to a business, to the extent that it changes their fortunes. So insights becomes overblown, and when we expect to find 20 of them inside a 100-page PowerPoint seems horrific to me. Yep. It should be that we can slap it on one page and we say, there we go, job's a good one, take that, do that, go home. Brilliant. And so I want us to get to that world, and I think that it is changing. I think we're definitely getting into a world where we are starting to see people value simple, actionable, fresh ideas. Yep. And yeah, because of my sort of broader background in marketing, I've kind of focused on that part of the equation. But then, over time, what then happens is you become focused on that part of the equation, then you go broad again, and naturally that does tend to lead you into the sphere of selling these things. And that's what I now do is I talk to people about their problems and work out how our agency can be a part of that solution. Naturally, you tend to need to have a bit of experience behind you, because you've seen a few things, and therefore you can take shortcuts. You can take shortcuts in how you approach finding a solution for people.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. So what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a child, and how does what you do now relate to that, would you say?
Chris. I mean, I think I was probably best described as a flighty child, in that I wanted to be everything and anything. Before I really understood what religion was, I wanted to be a vicar. And then I realized what religion was, and I stopped wanting to be a vicar. I wanted to be a fireman because Fireman Sam was cool. And then my dad really wanted me to be a lawyer, because we both used to watch Perry Mason a lot. And I thought Perry Mason was great, but it kind of only works in America. And I did study law, and I thought, oh, that's a great idea. But then you get deep into it, and you start to realize that the only real opportunity is either going down a path where you defend criminals for a fairly secure and solid income, or you roll the dice and try and get into, you know, fancy commercial law, but you may well fail and end up doing, you know, ambulance chasing work. And so I decided none of that was for me. And actually I was in a better place if I went and preferred my skills as a spreadsheet monkey to people. And I look back now and I think, you know, I'm paid reasonably well now, and I don't see why I ever thought it was a good idea. So yeah, where did I want to, I know I definitely didn't want to do this. That's for absolute certain. But then, to be fair, I never even knew it existed as a career.
Yeah.
It was, I don't even think even when I was going through school, I would have even known that this was something that existed. And it's amazing. I'm sure every week I come across a new job that exists out in the world that I didn't even know was a thing. And I go, isn't it fascinating how diverse this world is, and how narrow it is that kids get a really narrow definition of what they could end up as in their lives. And yet there's so many things that they ought to try, because the 10 different careers that you're shown at careers fairs just can't cover the breadth of human experience that surely we must want to go through. As a parent, as a parent, I think it's my job now, because I have a smallish child. It's my job to make sure that they see that. It's my job to make sure that they see that there's a wide variety of careers. And so long as he ends up in insights, that's all that matters.
Brilliant. I was going to say, it's interesting. Working what I did, I found how many different business types there are, that you know, how many different businesses are there to solve a specific problem that I was perhaps aware of, but didn't know. I remember going to see a business many years ago, and you're probably familiar with this, but I wasn't. And they make the dies that cut out the cardboard, that make the boxes that things go in, and from one piece of cardboard. And now, obviously, it makes a lot of sense to do it from one piece of cardboard, fold it, because there's a lot less fastenings. But I never realised there was a company that just made the dies and was very, very successful at it. And
yeah, I mean, I worked for Betty's for a time, so the famous Yorkshire tea rooms, and the amounts of different, I mean, I met people who in exactly that kind of business, but also people who I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but co-packing firms. So firms who will take your product and pack it into different forms and formats. Right. In a separate location that can quite often be by hand. So they will take stuff, they will individually wrap stuff, pack it, etc., all by hand. I met someone the other day who specializes purely in air source heat pumps, which obviously is now, you know, taking off. But the size of that business, and I thought, I couldn't believe how big it was. As a business, sometimes do you know what, again, probably weekly, I say I'm in the wrong job.
Well, it's just marvelous how many different, you know, solutions people have found to problems that we have. And of course, that innovation is incredible.
And that's why I mean, I don't want to blow a trumpet twice, but that's why I think it is really important that we understand people, because in every single one of those there is a human interaction, there is a human behavior that's driving it. So I go back to, it is foundational that you understand people. Now you can do that in so many different ways. Just as I said at the start, you know, you can stand on the shop door, you can watch those people go in and you can watch them go out again. And I used to live next to a guy called Trevor. He ran a market shop. It's a weird term, that market shop, but he used to have a market stall, and he decided he didn't really want to let go of the fact that it was a market stall, but he had a shop. And Trevor and I used to go cycling occasionally out in Settle. He's a lovely man. If anyone ever knows Trevor, anyone from Settle will know Trevor, but Trevor's a brilliant, brilliant person. And Trevor knows his customers. He knows them completely. Right. And me being me, you know, having been around the retail world quite a lot, I used to occasionally go, Trevor, have you thought about doing this? And he'd say, Alex, don't be stupid. I know they don't need that. Do you know what they need? They need lots and lots of toilet roll, sweets, and cleaning products. And that's all he sold mostly, except for, actually, to be fair to Trevor, he went a bit wild during the pandemic and started selling all sorts. He became a man with a plan. And I said to him, Trevor, have you ever thought about opening another shop? And he said, well, I can't open another shop because then it wouldn't be Trevor's Market's shop. And I said, well, that's kind of true. But, how did Tesco start? It was, it was Jack Cohen. It was his name above the door. And he said, well, who would run it? And I said, I don't know, just get a man to run it. And he said, but then it wouldn't be me, and I wouldn't understand what was going on there. And so his version of insight, of human insight, was just that. He'd stand on the door, he knew his customers, he knew what they wanted, job was a good one. But where you want to go that bit further, where you want to scale it, and you have that kind of ambition, understanding how people behave and what will trigger them to do the things you ideally would want them to do, is then obviously very important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fascinating. What a lovely story.
Big shout out to Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll have to dive over to Settle at some point. So just looking backwards a little bit, what would you say some of the biggest issues you've had to overcome?
Oh dear. I mean, there's obviously the times when things go wrong. And I mean, one of the biggest challenges I ever went through, one of the biggest stressful times I've ever gone through, is where things go wrong. And you can never see when things are going to go wrong. And, you can have all the sorts of plans in place and still things go wrong. And there's a couple of times, I mean, we've had projects go wrong and we've always put them right. We've always gone back over them and sorted them out. But sometimes things turn up that you weren't expecting. Sometimes you don't actually find anything out. And that can be the case. You can find out that everything that you found out was the stuff that was already known. And unfortunately, that's a bit of a gamble. It's not common, but it sometimes happens. The other thing is, I once worked at a wonderful company that produces cake. And it produces cake for all sorts of people, all sorts of retailers. Basically, name a retailer in the UK and they probably produce cake for them.
Right.
And they onboarded a very large amount of new business into their business. And I was working there in insights, and we basically couldn't swallow the amount of orders that we had, which is unusual. Everyone loves, everyone goes, win big. Yes. But they forget that you then, businesses are set up to be a certain size, and growth of anything over 5 or 10% tends to be a serious problem to swallow. And this was a much, much bigger than that. And everything just fell apart in my world. Right. Insight became insignificant. Delivering understanding of why people do the things they do just became completely insignificant, because I was part of a growth department. I was part of a department that was meant to drive further growth, and nobody wanted that, and nobody wanted to hear about what we could do next year. They were thinking about how the hell can we swallow this? And I remember I started out, I said, I'm going to help out. And I started out by just going down into the lines in the factory and putting two hands, to the wheel. And then I started to realize there was actually bigger problems that could be solved through using my brain instead of my hands. And I spent 18 days straight working 12 or 13 hours a day, essentially putting into place a bit of a system where we tracked product through. We didn't understand whether or not the orders going out at the end of the day were fulfilling the amounts, because nobody had any idea really. We were just trying to push as much bloody cake out the door. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Trying to push as much bloody cake out the door that you could, and nobody was tracking what we were putting out the door, and there was serious problems with that. So because I told you earlier on I had a misspent youth with computers, I developed a computer program, which basically tracks cake through the factory. And as I said, I spent 18 days doing it. And it was 18 of the most stressful days I have ever come across. And it physically wore on me. And I look back on it now and go, I'm really proud of that. But it showed me two things. One, which is you never really know what stress is until you really see it. You know, you never can say, oh, I'm stressed, until you really test yourself in that way. And the other thing is that as much as growth is important and it's something that we all fight towards, we should never ever forget that once we've got it, we need to do something about it, and there always ought to be a plan for it. Because one day it might actually land, and then yeah, you might end up with a problem on your hands, and you sure as hell do not want that problem on your hands, because it is one of the, honestly, I've never seen anything quite so horrific as that.
I completely concur. I think growth, fast growth, rapid growth can be as challenging as a lack of growth. It's a different challenge, but it can be as stressful, if not more stressful in many ways. Especially if you're a people person, if you're letting other people down.
Absolutely.
Often the sort of financial stress of not growing is more personal to the people that own the business, and that's their challenge. But when we're letting our clients down and those things, it can be really, really challenging. So
yeah, absolutely galling. Really, we had people that we'd sold to on site with us, putting their backs to the wheel as well, which was incredible. We had our clients in that factory packing cake, and we'd get to the end of a lengthy working day. We'd be in at 6, and sometimes we wouldn't be leaving until really late, and people would be physically and mentally exhausted, both us and them alike. And the one thing it was it sorted those who could from those who can't. And I don't mean that in a cruel way, but some people will naturally step up in that situation, and some people won't. And that is no disrespect to that person. That doesn't make them any less of a person. It doesn't make them any less of a leader or a capable person. It's just a different mindset. And then on top of that, it forged very strong bonds, to be fair, between us and our clients. Because you know what, they had choices, but they'd lent into one, and they went with it, and they said, you know what, let's fix this together. And that was unique, but very good to have.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I think some of the best relationships I've developed in business is solving dealing with challenges that we've created, complaints of clients. It happens occasionally, but how we deal with them obviously often builds a better relationship than we didn't have the challenge in the first place. So I completely get that. What would you say, what are some of your biggest learnings then in business and even in life that you've had from these things that have happened?
Biggest learnings, build a network of trust. I think that's one thing. You've got to have people around you that you trust, people that you from different walks of life. You need some people that you can talk to sometimes. I think that's really important. I would also say that there is something to be said about happenstance and luck. Don't believe that you will always be successful by putting in 18-hour days. There is a degree to which you will always be lucky. I've seen luck, I've seen it happen, and it just falls on people's plates, but you will increase your chances by working that bit harder. And I guess the reason I've got to probably where I've got to, which is a pretty reasonable part of my career, I'm in the happy zone, I guess, of where others might want to be if they were starting out, is diversity. I think try and be diverse. There's nothing wrong with diversity. There's nothing wrong with having seen a few different places, and I have. I have worked in jobs for a couple of years and then moved on. And as much as that isn't ideal for some people, for me, it's allowed me to see a very broad range of businesses in a very, very intimate way, which I just wouldn't have had access to if I'd have spent my entire career working in one business. And that diversity has allowed me to do the things I do today. So partway through my career, I freelanced, and I was a freelancer, and I did consultancy as well, and that allowed me that ability as well. That allowed me to go into some places and see places in a quite unique light. But I think, doing quite a diverse range of things, I think, is very, very positive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned, having people around you that you can talk to, and we're a coaching organisation. Who would you say is the best coach you've ever had in any, whether business or life, and what made them special?
Yeah, someone who probably doesn't realise it is a lovely woman called Anne Allen at That Cake Company, who sat me down one day and said, actually, I'm not sure this part of the world is right for you. You probably ought to think about doing this. And that's actually had quite a big impact on what I do. Essentially, I moved towards sort of commercial and sales roles. And actually it continues to resonate with me today. And she's a wonderful person. I think in the early part of my career, I had a line manager called Nicola, who was a very worldly wise ex-Nielsen person, and she taught me a lot in a not very friendly kind of way. She didn't sugarcoat stuff. She used to kick me under tables, and she was entirely brutal with it. And I'm sure that might not be seen to be the right way to do things these days, but I learned very quickly, and I learned what I needed to learn very quickly. And I thank her every day for her contribution to my career, because I wouldn't have risen as quickly as I did had it not been for her saying, you know what, Alex, that just isn't right. If she'd have just let me carry on and learn through osmosis, it would have taken me ages. But when I went into a client meeting with Morrison's and I promised them something that she didn't think I could deliver, she kicked me in the shins, and I quite quickly realized that was a mistake. So I think it is important to have someone who's prepared to give you very honest feedback.
Yes, brilliant. So have you picked up any quotes or sayings that you use regularly in any particular circumstance?
Yeah, there's one actually, which is fog, and it's my uncle actually. And to be fair, I probably should have called out my uncle, because he's a worldly wise business owner. Owns a company called Walker Brothers Elland that makes shop fitting parts. It's a fantastic business, and he's been doing it for years. And he likes to tell me a lot of stuff, and he likes to think that a lot of it's important, and not a lot of it is, but one thing was. And that's fog, which is facts, opinions, and guesswork. If you separate what people say to you into those three categories of facts, opinions, and guesswork, you'll go far, because quite a lot of what people say is either an opinion or guesswork, and knowing that it's an opinion or guesswork is quite useful. And Brilliant. So I very often use fog, clear the fog, because it will help you a lot in your interaction with somebody.
Love it. I love it. I'll write that one down. Actually, I'm having that one, because I find it really interesting, because we work a lot with what we call, most people work on beliefs as opposed to reality, and the way to undermine a negative belief, I can't do this, or they won't like that, is evidence. So what's the evidence for that belief? So that resonates very strongly with me. It's let's find out. Let's not worry about your opinion and I guess in the world of some of the part of what you do, I know it's very complex in this, but just because I may or may not like something doesn't mean the marketplace may or may not like something, because I'm not my perfect audience.
Exactly. We are not our target market. That's what that's what I think it's Mark Ritson that says it very regularly. But yeah, we are not our target market. We never will be. So when somebody sits down, I mean, it will make every researcher in the country groan when they sit in a meeting, they hear, my daughter does X or my wife does Y. And it's interesting and it's nice to form a hypothesis off that, but it isn't our target market. You know, the vast majority of people in this country are quite a lot older than the average person who works in business, B, quite a lot poorer than a lot of people that work in business, and C, watch a shitload of television. And on that basis, you know, we shouldn't be assuming things about, you know, what we do or our extended family do, because we're very unlikely to be close to them.
I remember our founder, Brad Sugars, once said, the most expensive advice you can ever get is free advice from an idiot. And it's you know, it's what's the basis on which you have that opinion is quite an important quite important question, I guess.
Yeah.
So what would you say you've learned about yourself as you've developed your career?
I probably once thought that I was an introvert, and I realized that's probably either false or it doesn't exist. I once thought that I was a very quiet, meek person who didn't really like putting himself out there, and that, yes, probably would never have seen himself, you know, flogging stuff to people. And now I'm in a career where that's what I do. And yeah, I definitely have realized that I am not the person who I once thought I was. I am certainly not an introvert. But I wouldn't necessarily class myself as an extrovert either. And on that basis, that it either doesn't exist or I am something in between, because I love talking to people. I love finding out about people's lives and what they're doing and the challenges they have. I love spending time in a room with people, hence why I'm in clients' meeting room right now. It's a unique thrill for me to do stuff like that. So I'm definitely 100% a million miles away from what I thought I was. But I also have started only just recently to find my limits, because when you're younger, you think you can rule the world, and I probably thought that I could do that, but I have started to realize there are definitely things that I can't do.
Fair enough. That's self-awareness is a wonderful thing, isn't it, ultimately? And,
yes.
And I think with behaviors, I mean, the ability to move between the flexibility move between introvert to extrovert to people to task at the right point is really valuable skill to develop and a behavior to develop in itself. So I guess I'm just interested in looking forward. What does the future look like for yourself at Spark, and what challenges might you face as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, Spark has relatively recently become part of Audience Collective, and Audience Collective is a group of marketing services specialists, of which Spark is the market research arm of that. You know, where we're moving towards is big global growth, and of course, as we've said earlier on, that brings its own challenges. So yes. Our biggest challenge, probably as a business, is finding people, because we are a people business. All of our assets are people, and in insights, we have brains. That's what delivers this stuff. It's people's brains, and so you have to find smart people to deliver smart results. Yeah, and so naturally we're in a race for talent. And that will probably continue for the short term. Where I see myself going is just keep flogging stuff. That's what I'll be doing for the next 10 years, because I enjoy it. To me, it's not about selling stuff. I very much believe in the idea of win-win. So we win by making a sale, but we only win that by getting it right for the client. And if we're not right for them, then you know, we shouldn't even chase it.
Brilliant. totally agree. So our definition of selling is professionally helping people buy what they need. And if they don't need it, then we don't sell it to them. But we have to establish what they need and then see. And we're the same. If we can't provide it, first thing we do actually see if we can find anyone else that can. Because serving our clients is how we succeed in the long run, whether a sale is made in the short term or not. But brilliant. Well, look, a couple of questions just as we sort of wrap up. This has been fascinating. I could talk all day, but what would you say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now?
Firstly, absolutely bloody well do it. I think I mean, to be fair, going into business right now will have its own unique challenges, but we probably are heading into a recession. I think it's fairly reasonable to assume it's going to happen. And what I've lived now through two major contractions of the economy, and the one thing I think I would definitely take out of that is, there's normally boundless opportunities that happen when that happens. And as much as it might be scary, I would jump in with 2 feet. And quite frankly, I wish I could be doing that right now, because I love the idea of it. So A, do it, but B, before you quit the day job, just have a bit of a plan and sound it out with some people, because there's nothing like rounding off the corners of a stupid plan that will do you a load of good. So yeah, do talk to some people and read around it, but absolutely just jump in, because there's a lot that can be learned by doing.
Brilliant. No, I completely agree. I think it's the biggest fear is that we don't do anything rather than we do something that doesn't work. It's
absolutely.
And if you started again, all over again, what is there anything at all that you do differently?
Do you know what? Really, honestly, no. I've loved the ride. I genuinely have. I wouldn't want to do it any differently, because I've had so much fun getting here. I genuinely would. I would, more than anything, if I genuinely went back to my time again, I would just be most concerned that I still got to do some of the things that I did. So I would have to be really careful to recreate my career, because as much as there have been horrific times, I've learned so much, and I wouldn't want to miss some of it.
Brilliant. I love that idea of being really careful to do it exactly again, because that's fascinating. Because I concur. I've had lots of sort of ups and downs. One of my favourite quotes is a Japanese saying, which is fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I think as long as you get up more times than before, but it's like, but some of those falls I probably wouldn't mind missing. However, your point is very valid. If you hadn't had it, maybe you wouldn't be where we are. So
I wouldn't. I had a business once upon a time, a long time ago, and we were proper seat of our pants. I don't know how we paid all of our bills in the end, but we got there. And I learned vast amounts doing that, and I wouldn't want to miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. The learning we get from the challenging times is way more than the learning we get from the easy times, the good times. It's very valid. And finally, what advice, if you could give any, to an 18-year-old you, if you were to go back in time?
Chase more girls.
I'll write that one down too. Now that's you'll be. I'm probably glad to know that's the first time I've had that response. Fantastic. Well, on that note, I'd really like to say it really has been very fascinating, actually, and delightful, really interesting, and I'd be good to come back in a year or so's time and just see how things are progressing. Especially. As we sort of talked earlier, I feel like a lot of behaviours have changed over the last 2 or 3 years, and whether they stick or not, and I guess that's going to affect how you advise your clients and how you work with clients. So that would be quite fascinating. Maybe swing around again and talk about that.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.